What is the weirdest thing you've seen at someone's house that they thought was completely normal? I had a friend in middle school whose family collected lint from their pockets and belly buttons and kept it in a big jar in the kitchen. He said it was for when someone was feeling sad, they could just put their hands in the lint and play with it to feel better? I have no freaking idea. I have no idea how that would make me feel better, but hey, whatever floats your boat as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. Story 2. One time I was at my friend's house and after playing some Mario Kart or something, we wanted to go outside to play, probably around 5th grade at the time. We get downstairs to his washroom, which connects to the hallway leading to outside, and the room is flooding quickly. Oh crap. There's at least an inch of water covering the floor, and we call his parents who run in and find that their washing machine's water depositing sink was clogged. Turns out they also took a crap in their sink, like that very sink, all the time, like it was normal to not have a toilet and then just casually crap in the device that is supposed to cleanse you. They said that the drain was large enough to handle it, but I didn't look, that's too far for me to go. About a minute later, I realized that my shoes were sitting in this crap water as well, so I walked home barefoot with them in a plastic bag. I had to give my shoes a frickin' funeral. Story 3. Was walking through town with my buddy once and we suddenly ran into one of his friends, a guy he hadn't seen for several years. So the usual small talk ensues and he says, "Why don't you guys come to my house for a coffee or something?" Since he lived in the city, we figured why not and walked and talked back to his place. So we get to his place and it's nasty as heck. I'm talking like filthy, not so much dirt and grime, but objects strewn about. The sink high with cutlery, toys, and other crap from his son absolutely everywhere, total disarray. This guy also had a dog and it smelled a little funky. He offers us both a cup of coffee and quickly notices, surprised, that there are no clean cups. So what does this guy do? Picks up 2 mugs from the coffee table, which was virtually invisible due to junk and no word. He puts them down towards his dog's nose, lets the dog lick the dregs out of the cups, then legit starts making the coffee without washing the cups. Needless to say, we both just sat there, holding the cups, feigning, taking a sip every now and again, parted soon after. He did it as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Story 4. Walked into my friend's kitchen. He said I could grab anything I wanted out of his pantry. So I see boxes and boxes of expired food. I'm not just talking about food that expired a month ago or even a year ago. I'm talking about expiration dates from like 1995. There were plenty of different snack foods with similar expiration dates. He thought this was completely normal and that the food still has taste. I was afraid of opening anything I found. Story 5. It's not that weird, but I remember hanging out at my friend's house when I was a kid and I was going to sleep over, so I was there for around 24 hours. His family didn't drink anything unless they were eating a meal. It's like they had 3 drinks a day, whereas my family pretty much had a drink around whenever we were in the house, even if it was just a warm glass of water. I was so used to always having something to drink that when I was sitting at my friend's house, I felt like I was going to pass away from dehydration. I kept asking for something to drink, but I didn't want to do it too much that I was annoying. At the time, that was something really strange to me, and they probably thought I was the strange one. Story 6. When I was 12, a friend of mine invited me over to her friend's house to swim in her pool. She shows us to her room to change, and as I'm changing, I hear my friend whisper, "What the hell?" I turn and look, and there are about 8 to 10 pads lined up on this girl's desk. The girl comes in shortly after, and my friend flat out asks her what the pads were all about. Apparently, her parents made her do that so they could check she wasn't pregnant and or being active. I found out later that the parents were super religious and this was their way of knowing that their daughter was still quote-unquote pure. Story 7. Have you ever been into the home of someone with OCD? The lady that used to live across the street from us was OCD. At 7 a.m., she would emerge from the house in perfect hair and makeup and begin her routine. Her lawn was immaculate. The grass was mowed with this ridiculously expensive lawnmower, which is something that would be used to mow the grass on a golf course. The curb was lined with brick, and she would go down the curb with a toothbrush and clean between the bricks every day. She would sweep her grass. Her son was not allowed to play in the grass. The shrubs and flowers were perfectly trimmed. The first time I visited the inside of her house, I was afraid to move. I remember looking at the rug in the entry foyer, which we were not allowed to step on. The tassels on the end of the rug had been perfectly straightened out, and it looked like they had been ironed. You would never know that a child lived in that house. It had to be pretty miserable for him. Story 9. I remember going over to a classmate's house. I can't remember, but I think her name was Susie. Doesn't matter. She's at least going to be Susie for this story. When I was around 10 or 11. Susie didn't have a lot of friends, so my mom arranged with Susie's mom for me to sleep over at their house. The family was a little off in a few ways. Firstly, they called each other by their family names. They would always say mother or father or sister, like, "Can you pass the butter, sister?" Susie told me they rented some movies for the sleepover. Great, I thought, but in reality, they rented one movie and watched it back to back 3 times, Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Then Susie said if I wanted, I could take a bath because I didn't have a shower. I said sure, but when she showed me the bathroom, the bathtub already had water in it. She said, "I should have asked you earlier, but I forgot. We are supposed to let guests go first. If you want, I can go after you, though." So, yeah, the family shared the same bathwater. I politely noped out of the bathroom and mentally counted down the minutes to when my mom would pick me up the next morning. Oh, and the mom put mayonnaise in the mashed potatoes. Wait, so what's wrong with mayonnaise and mashed potatoes? Because I'm not going to knock it until I try it myself, but hey, if you've tried it, let me know what it's like in the comment section down below. Story 9. When I was a kid, I was once visiting a friend. He was sick and in his bed. His older brother was teasing him and annoying him, so the father took the older boy downstairs, and while I was there, continued to horsewhip the older brother as punishment. I could hear the older brother being whipped, the whoosh of the whip and the crack of the whip and the cries of the older brother. They were always an odd family with a lot of issues. It came out later that the older brother was mistreating the younger sister. All very odd, but to do while another person was in the house and thinking that was acceptable? Wow, it's like nearly been 30 years later and it still bothers me. Story 10. When I was in the first grade, I went over to this girl's house. We were playing, and at one point we heard yelling. She went, "Quick, hide, my brother's back and he'll hurt us if he catches us." As we both hid under the bed, I was just going, what the heck? He was going around the house screaming for her to come out from hiding. It felt like we were hiding for a very long time before she decided it was safe for us to get out. I still don't know what the hell was going on. I don't remember what we were doing, but it's mostly chatting and playing in a room. We didn't go to his room or touch his things as far as I can remember. Oh, and that girl eventually developed a pretty violent streak too and became my oppressor. They're a weird family. They did crazier stuff too. The parents are publicly very, very religious and act really rich. They will do stuff like give $1,000 tips very publicly and insist on public and loud prayer sessions before meetings and meals. At the same time, they did things like go on vacation where they spent $10,000 per person and refused to pay the tour agency who already paid for them by always being too busy to pay. Of course, for them, $50,000 isn't much, but for the travel agent, it's a lot of money. One of their friends ended up paying the travel agent for them. At one point, the dad became my client. He needed to raise money for a project, and holy crap, it was impossible. My boss was so embarrassed when everyone we approached for funding went, "Now you're working with criminals?" He had great lawyers that got him out of everything, but his reputation was still crap. As one person put it, legally, he may be innocent, but morally, no. The whole family just proves my theory that the louder you proclaim your religion, the bigger the sin you're trying to hide is. Doesn't matter what religious background you're from. Story 11. Sadly, it wasn't even someone else's house. It was the flat I lived in with 3 other people. I was friends with 2 of them, and the third was a girl who joined when we were searching for a new flatmate. She seemed like a really nice, bubbly person. After about 2 months of being there, we noticed kitchen stuff going missing. It was easy to see because the kitchen was overloaded with stuff to the point that cupboards wouldn't close properly. Anyway, cutlery, plates, bowls, and glasses started missing. I mentioned it to the others, and they said they'd noticed too, but couldn't explain it. We asked the new girl, who said she had no idea where the stuff was and blamed the previous girl who lived with us. I saw her moving out with loads of stuff. About 2 months later, there were 0 bowls and very little cutlery and plates left in the kitchen, so I lost it and went into this girl's room. The place is disgusting, a complete dump. The room is so covered in stuff you can't see the floor. Piles of empty kebab, pizza, chicken boxes, tampon applicators on the floor. I turn the place over and find bowl after bowl, plate after plate, all the stuff that went missing. All of it is dirty and moldy. Some of the cutlery is rusty. It was revolting. The weirdest thing was a dirty plate with a pile of mustard on it left on the bed and under the covers. We confronted her about it and she broke down crying and left the flat the following week. Story 12. When I lived in a 4-person apartment dorm sophomore year with 3 friends I'd made freshman year, one of my roommates, let's call her Becky, used to take things from my other roommates' rooms. She'd sneak in when they were out, take something, and hide it in her room. She always kept her bedroom door closed and locked, usually even when she was home, and at the beginning of the year had asked us not to enter her room without knocking. She was weird and had bizarre issues with boundaries and personal space, which we knew, so we were all like, okay. One day, my roommate, let's call her Regina, lost her crap and started yelling because her stuff was disappearing. She had set a trap by strategically placing small, unspecial items in certain places in her room and made note of where they were so she'd remember not to move them. Regina is a clever girl. Her pencil, a quarter, a hair tie, a peppermint, things that you could easily misplace and think you had done it, so she knew someone was taking them. This trend of items disappearing went on for all of winter quarter and most of spring quarter before Regina set the trap and waited for all 4 items to be taken. Regina and my other roommate, I'll call her Jean, felt certain someone was taking their things early on, but even I was like, why would someone go in your room and take one of your socks? So we were all convinced the missing items were just the absent-minded misplacements that happen in life. The day after Regina revealed her trap and let out her totally justified anger, a box appeared on the coffee table in the living room. I came home to find Regina and Jean sitting on the couch brooding to each other. When I came in, Jean said, "Becky has decided to return our stuff." I looked in the box and there were all the little missing objects. Some things neither of them even realized were missing. I was aghast and said, if there's anything of mine in that box, I will frickin' end her, but there wasn't. Becky came home late that evening, coming in the door sheepishly. We all sat on the couches and stared at her down as she took off her shoes and hung up her hoodie. Then she turned and looked at us, then smiled all huge and started laughing and said, "Ta-da!" She said it was just a prank. She had wanted to mess with our heads and enjoyed it so much when one of them would comment about being unable to find something to her, not accusing her, just mentioning, "Have you seen my green Sharpie? I can't find it anywhere." And she'd pretend to help them look for it. Then they asked why she didn't take anything from me. She said that, 1, I'd have caught on immediately if my things started disappearing because I'm not absent-minded. 2, she was scared I would have physically harmed her if she did. And 3, she knew I would find a way to get her back, but worse. Then she said instead of taking my thing, she would nap in my bed if she knew for sure would be gone for a while. That's when I realized all the time she'd text me or Jean and ask if we were going to dinner. Jean and I went out to eat together a lot and would decline if we asked her to join us, that she was finding out times I'd definitely be gone for at least an hour or 2. Apparently, Regina caught her in my bed once and was going insane all over, but Becky begged her not to tell me. She justified being in my bed with my bed being more comfortable, which it was, which they all knew, so Regina believed her instead of thinking she was a nutcase. Regina thought she and Becky were close friends, closer than herself and me, so she didn't tell me. Such a freaking lunatic. I could write a book about all the weird crap she did in the time I knew her. Story 13. When I was 16, my friend moved from her mom's house to her dad's house because he couldn't pay child support anymore. So her sister stayed with her mom and she stayed with her dad, then it was an even split. He lived in a trailer on a large piece of land in the middle of nowhere. I go over one day for a sleepover and her dad isn't there. The next day, still not there. The next day, still no dad. When I asked where she was, she said he didn't live there. He lived with his mom. His mom just paid for her to live there. It seemed cool at the time. Many awesome parties were had. Many bad parties were had. But looking back on it, like, what the heck? A 16-year-old girl lived there all alone in the middle of nowhere. Story 14. Not having a single frickin' thing in the kitchen cabinets ever. No plates, no silverware, no cups, pots, or pans, nothing. Not even an ounce of food. Their stove wasn't even hooked up. The fridge was full of water bottles and sodas. They had a deep freeze with boxes and boxes of microwave food for, quote, emergencies. They literally ate every single meal from a fast food place. Once I mentioned wanting spaghetti while I was there, and they flipped out because that was like special occasion food. You went to sit-down restaurants for that, and it was expensive. Okay, so the best part about this is that a homemade spaghetti dinner is cheaper than going to a fast food place. Story 15. I had a friend in elementary school who was not allowed into the sitting room or dining room. He had a hamster that he was allowed to put into a ball that would run around the house. So one day the hamster got into the forbidden zone and he freaked out. He was seriously worried, but his parents were not home. He didn't know what to do, but he assumed they would be more angry if he left the hamster in that room, so he went in and got the hamster out. As soon as his parents came home, he ran downstairs and apologized for the footprints on the carpet. He said, "I'm sorry about the footprints on the carpet. The hamster went in there and I had to get it out." They looked like they were going to talk to him about it later. It was nutty. Story 16. This happened to my girlfriend when she was in uni. She's over at her friend's house staying the night. This is her first time there and everything seems normal. Parents seem nice. While they're getting ready for bed, her mom shouts up and asks if either of them would like a cup of tea. My girlfriend declines the offer, but her friend shouts back, "Yes, please, and will you put it in my bottle?" At first, my girlfriend thought maybe she misheard. But sure freaking enough, her mom comes upstairs with some tea in a baby's bottle. My girlfriend and her friend were around 20 at the time, and she said it was one of the strangest things she's ever seen. Story 17. In 4th grade, I stayed overnight for the first time at a friend's house. His whole family was super nice and gave us free reign of this huge farm they lived on. They had 3-wheelers, go-karts, dirt bikes, jet skis for the pond out back. The place was amazing. Anyways, it didn't get weird until the next morning. We slept outside in tents. I woke up last. I ran into the house to find my friend, and I froze when I got to the kitchen. There, either sitting at or standing by the table, was his whole family. Him, his mom, dad, older brother, and 2 older sisters, just plain white t-shirts and not much else. His mom tells me to take a seat, breakfast almost ready. I do. She walks over with a plate, and her bush was eye level as she asked if I had fun last night. I mumbled something and tried to play it cool. Everybody was walking around, getting food, hugging each other, talking about their day like it was no big deal. I never said anything to my buddy, and I stayed over at his place as often as I could all the way through high school. Besides all the cool crap they had, his mom and sisters were smoking hot. Story 18. When I was young, I was friends with a girl from my neighborhood. This was back when people thought nothing of allowing a group of young girls walk through the neighborhood alone to see friends within a few blocks distance. Usually we never played inside, but hung around the small playground that was nearby. One day we were at the playground when it began to drizzle, so this girl offered to let us come to her house to play. We were excited because she had an Atari, so we happily agreed. The whole family had this white blonde hair, albino-like. The girl, her brothers, her mother, and her father. Her mother was a chubby woman with red cheeks who seemed nice and gave us some cookies. We got to her house and played Atari in the living room for a while, then she took us up to her bedroom. But before we got to her bedroom, we walked down a hallway with a tall bookcase in it. She stopped to show us the picture books that her dad shared with her. She said that they were for the games they played. Inside the books, which were just magazines, were glossy photos of men and women in unusual positions. The girl told us that her dad would show these to her and sometimes they would act out the scenes. She then asked if any of us did the same things with our families or if our dads ever showed us his thing. She didn't know if it was wrong or not, but she said it made her feel funny. It was the late 70s and I was young and I had no idea what that was all about. I had the sense that something was wrong, but you just didn't go home and tell your parents these kinds of things. Many years later, when I recalled the scene, I was horrified, but by that time I was no longer in contact with her. I always wonder what happened to her. The memory haunts me to this day. Okay, so that story started out like lol, albinos, and Atari, and then it got really dark. And hopefully you're learning a thing or two from this video, like not to make the same mistakes. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 19. Staying at a friend's house when I was about 9. He had a younger sister and younger brother, and ColecoVision, but that's an aside despite how cool it was at the time. Everything seemed normal until morning. Get up, Eric said. Reviel. Despite it being called Reviel, there was no actual horn playing or anything. What? Get up, he whispered urgently. That means inspection. So, groggily, I helped him make his bed, which he did with a panicked urgency. I was sleeping in a trundle unit, which he also made, and did some weird pinch seaming to make the flat sheet creaseless. Then he said we had to stand in front of his bedroom door, hands behind our back, standing upright and straight ahead. His brother and sister were doing the same, all of us in our pajamas. His dad came up the stairs, dressed in a plain white shirt, slacks, and a tie like he was going to work. He went into the younger brother's room, and the little kid followed him in. I heard the father say stuff like, "Does that belong there? Why is your comforter backwards? I told you to fix that poster." Then he comes back out and does the same thing to the sister. "I did not buy you that doll so it could sit slouched on a shelf. Those books need to be straightened. You didn't put away your socks neatly." Every time I turned my head to look down the hall at the spectacle, Eric hissed, almost desperately, "Stare straight ahead, don't look." Then it was our turn. The father nodded at me, said my last name as a greeting, and then went in. The father inspected whatever he inspected. By now, I was too scared to look at him, so I am not sure what he was looking at or for. Eric did better than his siblings. All he got told was that his scout uniform needed to be washed and his windows were dirty. Then the father went into the hallway and shouted, "Ten hut!" He quickly inspected fingernails, hair, and teeth. He commented that mine were dirty and I should not bite my nails. Now, he didn't seem mean per se, just really strict and firm, and the rest of the day went normally. And yes, when I asked, his dad was a former drill sergeant. All right, unlike some of the others, the ending of this one actually makes kind of good sense. Story 20. I haven't thought of this for many years, but it is a good story. I was working as a telemarketer at a large call center around the year 2000. Basically, everyone there was huge grass smokers, including myself. After work, I went with this guy I didn't really know to a crappy little apartment to buy a bag from him. He started showing me some stuff, most interesting of which was a frickin' bazooka. I'm talking like a real deal shoulder-launching World War II looking bazooka. It got even weirder when his weird-looking girlfriend showed up, and as I was trying to do the old, oh, look, at the time, I gotta go routine, we were all outside when an older dude pulled up. Turns out it is the girl's father, whom she has never met. Tears and cliches ensued like, it's so nice to have a face to go along with the voice, etc. And I was way too spiked for that crap, and I got the heck out of there. Story 21. When I was a kid, I slept over at a kind of friend's house. Woke up in the morning starving and ready for breakfast. The host family had toast made, just toast, about half a loaf of bread. Now, this isn't that unusual, but the way it was served was directly on the scummy-looking table with no plates whatsoever. Even the butter was just plopped on the table with no dish. Now, I'm no dirt prude. I'll eat stuff that fell on the floor, but I really couldn't stomach this noise. The whole family was just gobbling it up, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Story 22. I was dating an Asian girl, and like many Asians, extended family seemed to share a large house. There was my girlfriend's parents, her mother, her auntie, and her cousin all living in the house. I'd been there a few times and guess I hadn't noticed lights always being on, but this time was the first night I slept over. They have their bedroom lights off and all the other lights in the house turned on. I asked my girlfriend why they leave the lights on. Apparently they are trying to save energy and are using energy-saving bulbs. They think that by leaving these lights turned on, they're saving energy and getting a cheaper electricity bill. I explained to my girlfriend that that is stupid, and she understood when I told her, but never told her family about it because she's not allowed to tell her elders that they're wrong, etc. Story 23. I'm a piano teacher that goes to my students' houses. I went to this one house for my first lesson. The house is a very small ranch. I walk in the living room, and there is a life-size painting hanging covering an entire wall of Michelangelo's creation. Taught the entire lesson to a 7-year-old little girl with a life-size atom next to me. When I went the next week, the painting was gone. Another house I go to has Buddha on one wall and Jesus on the other right across from each other. They seem to be staring at each other. Jesus is on the cross and grimacing, and Buddha seems to be smiling at him. It's kind of weird. There also is a giant Buddha statue right by the piano that I sometimes find resting my arm on his stomach accidentally. Story 24. I once stayed the night at my great-grandmother's house. She and her husband were older than dirt and had separate bedrooms because when you're that old, I would imagine you just want some frickin' peace. Anyway, they decided to sleep in the same bed that night so that I could have a room to myself. It was a cinder block house that stank of old people, biscuit dough, collards, and sweet tea. As I lay there in the bed that night, I kept the lamp on, letting my eyes wander the room. There were like 1,000 pictures on the wall of my great-grandfather, our family, his friends, and a bunch of people I didn't know. There was dust covering everything and the sheets felt ancient and it smelled like there was an attempt to wash them. They kept it at a brisk 103 degrees in the house at all times, so between the heat and the stench, I couldn't sleep. I tried to open a window and noticed that it was sealed shut from being painted over so many times. As I was standing by the window, I noticed something shiny under the bed and curiosity got the best of me. I took a knee by the bed and grabbed the object and pulled it out, and then it hit me. I heard a sloshing sound. It was a chamber pot. Crap, of course. These people probably grew up in the time of the Black Plague. Of course they had a chamber pot. Inside, riding the golden waves like ships in the Great War, were two of the thickest and most fibrous stuff I have ever seen. How my great-grandfather managed to craft those out was a remarkable feat in itself. I didn't know what to do, so I slid the pot back under the bed and slept in the living room, claiming I had just fallen asleep reading. I only went back for Christmas. Story 25. In college, I was casually dating a guy. Neither of us ever made any implication to anyone that it was a serious relationship. So one weekend, he invites me home to his parents' house because he knows I live in a crappy apartment with crappy roommates. Who got haircuts in the living room and didn't sweep up the hair, also falls into this category. And nothing but a supply of ramen noodles and cockroaches to entertain me. I met his parents, they seemed nice enough, and they said they were just going to hang out in the living room while he and I made our dinner in the kitchen. His mom overhears us talking about attractive celebrities or something like that, and she suddenly shouts at her, "Baby boy may not be perfect, but it helps that he's cut." I laugh awkwardly, trying to act like I'd never seen said thing, wondering, where the hell are you going with this, lady? And she says, I can prove it to you if you didn't know. I look at him and he doesn't seem too concerned, so I look back at her and she pulls a jar out of the cupboard. Yep, it was a jar with this thing in it, 20-year-old pickled thing just hanging out in the cupboard, like totally normal. Not? Story 26. I'm going to flip the prop and tell one that I considered normal at the time and everyone else thought was weird. When I was 14 or so, I lived in my parents' finished basement. My room was in the back. I began noticing that bees, specifically yellow jackets, were getting into my room quite often, like several per day. I had a drop ceiling and noticed they were coming from my light socket, so I lifted a tile, and I found that they had made a nest in my ceiling. I told my mom, and she said she would call an exterminator. Fast forward about 5 months, still no exterminator. I'm used to it. There are bees flying around 24/7, and I don't give them a second thought. I'm practically living in a beehive. I'm in my room playing whatever game I played around that time. I think that probably would have been SOCOM 3. And I hear my mom come down the stairs and approach my room. I value my privacy and she knows that, so she rarely comes to my room. So she walks in and sees a swarm of bees and just freaks. I wasn't allowed back in my room for nearly a week while they took care of the infestation. I had told her at least once a week about the bee problem, but she hadn't seen it for herself, so she had assumed it was just a small nest in my ceiling where occasionally one would find its way into my room. No, my room was the hive. Surprisingly, I didn't get stung even once. I think it had to do with how calm I was about their presence. Now talk about giving off a chill vibe. The bees got a good whiff of that and left him alone. Story 27. Somewhere around 6th grade, I stayed over at a friend's house for the first time. It was my first sleepover since moving to a new state. So we do the usual stuff, play outside, chasing his sister around and blowing stuff up with firecrackers because his family ran a stand and he had tons. It comes time for sleep and we head downstairs to the kids area. Downstairs was basically just a playroom and bedroom for the kids. My friend asks me if I want to see something cool. He lifts a plywood sheet in the middle of the room to reveal a big hole. They were digging a tunnel outside. The parents totally knew and they didn't care. They busted straight through the foundation and made a tunnel about 10 feet out. Two things, there was no support in there at all, and my friend nonchalantly mentioned that, yeah, a ton of spiders seemed to get in through the hole too. Hobo spiders, like big, poisonous, aggressive spiders. I didn't sleep well that night. Story 28. When I would spend the night at my cousin's house, I saw a couple of things that just struck me odd. First, my aunt would eat a raw hamburger out of the package, not like a little bit. She would get a pound of hamburger out of the fridge, park her back on the sofa, and eat the entire package with a fork. The other thing they did was instead of washing their dishes after a meal, they would let their dogs lick them clean and then put them back in the cabinet. They acted like this was normal behavior. Hell, maybe it is, and I'm the nut bar. Story 29. During high school, my girlfriend came to stay at my house for the weekend. We sat down with my family for your average bacon and eggs breakfast. Everything was going great until my mom brought the rice cooker over to the table and I started dishing up. My girlfriend says, "What the heck is with the rice?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Why are you eating rice with bacon and eggs?" And I just replied, "What the hell do you eat bacon and eggs with?" And that's how I figured out that it's not normal to eat rice with your bacon and eggs. I should mention that my family is Chinese, though I am 5th generation Australian. Story 30. Not too long ago, I was at my friend's house for the first time and everything was normal, just hanging out, drinking. End up staying so as to not drive home intoxicated. Next day, I went to handle my usual normal morning business. Noticed there's no toilet paper, so I holler at my friend to grab me some, and he's like, "Dude, use the towel and peroxide." I was like, "Peroxide?" He quickly, just as if completely normal, "Yeah, you don't clean your bum with peroxide?" I was like, "No." He goes on to tell me how his parents showed him to splash a little water from the flushed bowl, then give a little peroxide wipe. I no longer question his 28 and single situation. Story 31. I live in South India and once had a neighbor who still was what we call an Indian joint family. Father, mother, 2 sons and daughters-in-law, 5 granddaughters, all in less than 1,000 square feet. They're probably some of the last of such ones, and here's something I just can't accept at my home but was just no big deal in theirs. The ladies cook and they all sit on the floor together and eat. In particular, they don't self-serve when they want, but instead split the whole meal into their respective plates first so that no one gets less or more. Because the plates would be full right when they begin their meal, they set aside some of the rice on their plates right next to them on the floor. That's the floor they walk on, etc., and they place the rice on there. They wiped the floor clean before and after every meal, but still, this was just unacceptable to me, but perfectly okay to them. Story 32. I was best friends with twins in middle school. I would go to their house during the summer to spend the night and would stay 3-4 days. They had a big farm and we would run around all summer long. Well, one day I was over and started my period. Not fun, but it happens. I asked my girlfriends for a maxi pad. They told me they didn't use maxi pads and handed me a bag of mismatched socks. They told me that's what they used as maxi pads. I called my parents to come get me, and they also like to walk into the cow pasture with no shoes or socks on and squish the cow patties between their toes. So gross. Story 33. While I was in grad school, I walked dogs as a part-time thing for a local small business. They did dog walks, dog daycare, obedience classes, etc. I love animals, and it got me outside for some study breaks. It was a great job, except for this one house. I show up for the first time at this house, and the dog owners aren't there. Normal. I'd been given a key, and according to the client notes, I was supposed to walk 2 dogs. Only one, though, greeted me at the door. So I look around for the other one. Nothing. The rest of the house is practically empty. I was supposed to give the dogs treats too, so when I walked through the kitchen, I looked around for those. I eventually found the milk bones in the fridge along with a 2-liter of soda, a bottle of ketchup, and a bottle of mustard. That was the only food product of any sort in the house. So I walked the first dog. I figure it has to go to the bathroom and maybe the other one will come out from wherever it had been hiding while I was away. I come back, still no second dog, but I do find a basement, so I walk down there calling the dog's name. It's hard to see because there are no lights down there, so I gotta rely on what filters down from the doorway up above. There's a litter box on the stair landing, and I glance inside. It is full of crap, but there are no cats or any other signs of cats in the house. I step down into the basement and into ankle-deep piles of something soft and spongy. I'm weirded out by now, but I thought I heard a rustle, so I take a few more steps in, wading through the spongy stuff, and I call the dog's name some more. Now I'm around the corner from the stairs, and it is very dim. I can't really see anything, and I'm about to give up when something brushes my face. I noped out of there faster than I've ever run before. I had to go back there the week after that, and I seriously expected to end up in some pit down in that basement a la Silence of the Lambs. Story 34. My friend in middle school has a little brother who thought he was an inventor. This kid was a new kind of special. I go into his house, and I see his little brother carrying a whole car bumper. My friend just played it off. It's fine, he does this stuff all the time. I got a look at this kid's room. It looked like a junkyard with various stuff taped together. If you were to trip in his room, you would definitely get a face full of sharp metal objects, mufflers, like whole mufflers, bumpers, hubcaps, broken glass, all kinds of stuff. The kid had a name for all these things that were taped together. No one even thought of anything of it or even asked where he got it. Story 35. Several years ago, I'd been casually seeing this guy. He invited me over to his place one day, so I went. He gave me no heads up whatsoever and didn't even mention it. So I got there to this house of animals, ferrets, dogs, cats, and birds. There was crap everywhere. I mean, literally, piles of crap throughout the house. A completely full and overflowing litter box in the living room. The stench was something I've never experienced before. It was his mom's house and her animals. She was a nice lady, but spent all her time off work in her bed. It was a horrible sight, situation, and smell. The smell. But he just acted like it wasn't anything to mention, so yeah. Story 36. I went to my buddy's aunt's place to help install a TV, and she had an itty-bitty puppy. The puppy, after getting all excited to see company, decided to take a squat in the middle of the living room. After dropping its mini-me's off where a coffee table would normally be, the pup goes a few feet over and takes a nice warm whiz also on the floor. Now, I have a dog too, so my comment was something along the lines of, "Oh, hey, I have some great tips to help train your puppy to go outside before she gets too old." To which my friend's aunt replied, "Oh, no, she's 5, she's all good, but thanks." And so I learned that the dog was a teacup dog, and my friend's aunt just lets her dog take a mess wherever she pleases inside her apartment. So I put my shoes back on. Story 37. One of my very best friends growing up lived in a really old house. They had a fire pit in the yard that they used to burn garbage in. Apparently they had a permit, I don't know. Also, their water was permanently rust-colored. The dishes and the dryer came out rust-colored. It was just a fact of life. They were just used to it, but that's not the weirdest thing. The toilet was caked with black. It was caked with years and years of accumulated mess. The toilet never did flush. They would pour a bucket of water in which would gradually drain the bowl. I tried to avoid ever going number 2 there, but one day I didn't have a choice. The worst part was the smell. Imagine the last 10 times you poop, but like all at once? Yeah. Shortly before they moved, they replaced that old toilet. It was sitting out in the yard for a while. Story 38. My house, my mom is obsessed with saving money. Every bathroom with a shower has a clean 5-gallon bucket with lid. All the water going into the toilets is turned off. You have to catch the cold water from when you're waiting for the shower to warm up in these buckets and save it. The water buckets are moved to the other bathrooms without showers or to the laundry room if the bucket is full, that is, swapped for an empty bucket. After you flush the toilet, you fill the tank back up with water from the bucket. To do laundry, unless you need hot water, you fill the washer with, yes, bucket water. If you need hot water, you run the showers into empty buckets, saving the water until it gets hot. Then you catch the hot water in buckets and put it into the washing machine. This was my life growing up, and to this day, my mom is almost 70. She still does this. She sees nothing wrong with any of this and deems critics money wasters. Story 39. Went to a weird party way out in the cuts. Most people had shown up on dirt bikes and four-wheelers. Anyways, there was basically a shack and some outbuildings and a lot of beer. From what I could tell, the parents just up and left their 22 to 25-year-old kid out there and were gone. He had not paid any of the bills, so the power and water were cut, but there were lanterns and a generator going. Anyways, his room, and I mean every inch of wall and door, was covered in corn magazine pictures that seemed to have been epoxied onto the wall somehow. Yikes, I guess it would be like decoupage. Anyways, I went in, took in the site, thought it was weird, and I went to drink a beer next to a lantern in the living room. And if any of these stories got to you, that last one, gave me shivers from the inside out. Here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.